The space station Zephyrian Prime was always bustling with activity. It was a massive hub where different alien species and humans worked, traded, and sometimes clashed over their differences. Among the many visitors was Kyra, a cocky alien warrior from the Draveri race, a proud species known for their strength and strict biological cycles. Kyra sat across from Ryan, a human engineer, in the station's common area. She leaned forward with an amused smirk. "So, humans don't have a mating season?" she asked, her tail flicking lazily. Ryan sighed, already used to the strange questions aliens often ask about humans. "Nope. We don't need one. We can, well, form relationships anytime." Kyra scoffed. "Impossible. Your species must have a natural cycle like everyone else. How else do you know when it's time?" Ryan raised an eyebrow. "We don't need nature to tell us when. We choose." Kyra laughed, a sharp sound that drew the attention of others in the room. "That makes no sense. Every species has an instinct, a drive. You're telling me humans just decide? That's ridiculous." Ryan leaned back, smirking. "It's called free will. Ever heard of it?" The aliens around them, curious about the conversation, started gathering. The Threlian merchant chuckled. "I agree with the Draveri girl. Humans are strange. No natural mating cycle. How do they even survive as a species?" Kyra crossed her arms. "Exactly. It's weak. Our species only bonds during the cycle, ensuring strong offspring. But humans? You're telling me you can bond anytime. Prove it." Ryan blinked. "Prove? What exactly?" Kyra grinned, her sharp teeth flashing. "Prove to me that humans can form relationships anytime. Show me how your kind bonds, without instincts, without a cycle. I want to see how this free will works." Ryan rubbed his temples. "You're serious?" She nodded. "Completely." By now, the entire common area was listening. A green-skinned Eurythi trader whispered, "This should be interesting." Ryan sighed, realizing he had no way out. "All right. Challenge accepted. But be warned, you might not be ready for what you're about to learn." Kyra leaned forward. "Oh, is that a threat?" Ryan smirked. "More like a promise." As the aliens around them laughed and whispered, Ryan realized he had just agreed to one of the strangest challenges of his life. But if Kyra thought humans were weak, he was more than ready to prove her wrong. Little did he know, this challenge was about to change everything. The space station Zephyrian Prime was alive with curiosity. Word had spread fast. A Draveri warrior had challenged a human to prove that humans could bond anytime, without instincts or a mating cycle. Many aliens found the idea absurd. To them, relationships were purely biological, controlled by seasons or pheromones. But humans, they claimed to have free will. And now Ryan had to prove it. Kyra sat across from him at a small cafe inside the station. Her golden eyes studied him with amusement. "All right, human, show me. How do your people bond?" Ryan smirked. "It's not just about mating like you think. Humans have many ways of connecting. We form bonds through conversation, shared moments, and trust." Kyra raised an eyebrow. "That sounds slow. Inefficient." Ryan chuckled. "Maybe. But it's real. We don't just wait for nature to tell us. We choose who we want to be with." Kyra leaned forward, her tail flicking behind her. "Then show me. Teach me how humans bond." A few aliens had gathered around, pretending not to listen. The blue-skinned Eurythi casually sipped his drink, while a tall, armored Quartek mercenary pretended to check his communicator. They all wanted to see how a human would prove something so strange. Ryan decided to start simple. "All right, let's try something humans do all the time." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small chocolate bar. He unwrapped it and broke off a piece. "Here." He handed it to Kyra. She frowned. "What is this?" "Chocolate. A human treat. Sharing food is one way humans bond." Kyra hesitated but took the piece. She sniffed it, then popped it into her mouth. The moment the flavor hit her tongue, her eyes widened. This is good. Ryan grinned. See, sharing food is a small way of showing care. It builds connection. Kyra swallowed and smirked. That was simple. What else? Ryan thought for a moment. Then he leaned forward slightly. Eye contact. Kyra blinked. What? Humans use eye contact to connect. It shows confidence, trust, and sometimes attraction. Kyra scoffed. That's ridiculous. Ryan held her gaze, his expression calm but challenging. She stared back. For a moment, it was just the two of them. Golden alien eyes locked onto human brown. Then, suddenly, she looked away. Ryan smirked. See, it works. Kyra frowned. I just got bored. Sure. Ryan leaned back. Want to try something else? Kyra crossed her arms. Fine. But this experiment of yours won't change my mind. I still think human bonding is weak. Ryan chuckled. We'll see about that. As the gathered aliens whispered among themselves, Kyra had no idea that this challenge was about to change everything she believed. Kyra sat across from Ryan, arms crossed, her tail flicking in frustration. The space station Zephyrian Prime hummed with activity around them, but her focus remained locked on the human. This bonding of yours, she said, her golden eyes narrowing, it still makes no sense to me. Ryan chuckled, sipping his drink. That's because you're thinking of it as just biology. Human relationships aren't just about instinct. They're about connection, emotion, and choice. Kyra scoffed. Emotion is a weakness. My people bond only when the cycle demands it. That way, there are no distractions. Ryan leaned forward, smirking. And yet, you're very distracted right now. Kyra's tail flicked sharply. Only because I want to prove you wrong. The gathered aliens, a few Urethi traders, a Cortec mercenary, and a Threlian scholar, pretended not to listen. But they were all curious. No one had ever seen a Draveri take such an interest in human customs before. Ryan decided to take the challenge further. All right, let's try something else. Humans bond through touch. Kyra raised an eyebrow. Touch. Ryan reached across the table and lightly tapped her hand. See. Simple. Kyra's reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened, and she jerked her hand away. The watching aliens gasped. Ryan frowned. Was that bad? Kyra narrowed her eyes. You think touch is nothing. Ryan blinked. Well, yeah, it's a normal part of human relationships. Kyra stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. In my culture, touch is sacred. Only bonded mates touch each other like that. Ryan's eyes widened. Oh, well, that explains the reaction. The Quartek mercenary chuckled. Careful, human. You may have just proposed without knowing it. Ryan paled. Wait, what? Kyra huffed, her face turning a deeper shade of violet. I'm not bonded to you. This was a mistake. Ryan raised his hands. Look, I didn't mean to offend you. It's just a human custom. If I knew, I wouldn't have done it. She stared at him, her expression unreadable. Finally, she exhaled. Fine. I won't challenge you over it, but you should be more careful. Ryan sighed in relief. Noted. Kyra sat back down, her expression thoughtful. Humans truly bond differently than I thought. Ryan smirked. See, you're already learning. Kyra narrowed her eyes. Don't get cocky, human. This experiment isn't over yet. As the tension eased, the aliens around them whispered, exchanging bets on whether this challenge would end in disaster, or something far more unexpected. Kyra sat in silence, her sharp golden eyes watching Ryan closely. The tension from their last misunderstanding still lingered between them, but something had changed. Ryan leaned back, his smirk never fading. You're thinking too hard about this, aren't you? Kyra scoffed. I think logically. Unlike humans, I don't let emotions distract me. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Oh, then why do you look so confused? Her tail flicked, betraying her frustration. She wasn't confused. She was just curious. At least, that's what she told herself. The other aliens in the cafe, a few Eurythi traders, a curious Threlian scholar, and the ever-present Quartek mercenary, continued watching, pretending to mind their own business. Ryan tapped his fingers on the table. All right, let's try something different. Kyra crossed her arms. I doubt you'll surprise me, human. Ryan grinned. Humans bond through shared experiences. Let's do something together. Kyra tilted her head. Like what? Ryan thought for a moment, then pointed to the corner of the cafe where an old Terran jukebox stood, dancing. Kyra blinked. Dancing. Ryan nodded. It's something humans do for fun, to bond, to express emotions. Kyra's lips curled into an amused smirk. You mean you flail around in an attempt to impress each other? Ryan laughed. Not exactly. It's about rhythm, movement, connection. She leaned back. Fine. Show me. Ryan stood up and walked over to the jukebox. He pressed a few buttons, and soon, a soft, melodic tune played through the cafe. It wasn't loud or aggressive, just a simple human song with a slow beat. He turned back to Kira and held out a hand. Come on. It's easy. Kyra eyed his hand suspiciously. You really think I'll fall for this human trick? Ryan smirked. I thought Draveri warriors weren't afraid of challenges. Her eyes narrowed. Challenge accepted. She stood up, ignoring the whispers around her, and placed her hand in his. Ryan guided her to the open space, placing one hand lightly on her waist and holding her other hand up. Just follow my lead. Kara stiffened at first, unaccustomed to such casual contact. But as Ryan gently moved with the rhythm, she found herself mirroring his steps. It was strange, but not unpleasant. The other aliens watched, fascinated. A Draveri warrior dancing with a human. Unheard of. Kara glanced up at Ryan. Humans really do things differently. Ryan smiled. Told you. For the first time, Kyra felt something unfamiliar. A strange warmth, a flicker of something she couldn't explain. And that realization unsettled her more than anything. Kara sat alone at the cafe after the dance, staring at her hands as if they held the answer to a question she couldn't even form. Why did she feel so strange? Ryan had left to check on his next work shift, leaving her with nothing but thoughts she didn't want to have. Her fingers still tingled from his touch. Ridiculous. She was a Draveri warrior. She wasn't supposed to care about something as meaningless as a dance. It was just an experiment. A challenge. Nothing more. Before she could shake the feeling, a deep voice interrupted her thoughts. So, it's true. A Draveri warrior dancing with a human. Kyra's eyes snapped up. Vikrin. He was another Draveri warrior, taller and broader than Kyra, with dark red markings along his arms. His golden eyes flickered with disapproval as he crossed his arms. Kyra's tail twitched. Why are you here? Vikrin smirked. Word travels fast. The station is buzzing with rumors about you and your human experiment. Kyra scowled. It's none of their concern. Vikrin leaned down, his voice lowering. It is our concern. You are Draveri. You should not be playing human games. Kyra clenched her fists. It's a challenge, nothing more. Vikrin scoffed. Then why do you look so distracted? Kyra opened her mouth to argue. But before she could, Ryan walked back into the cafe. He paused when he saw Vikrin standing over Kyra, and in that moment, the tension in the room thickened. Vikrin turned to Ryan, ice cold. You must be the human causing all this trouble. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Trouble? I thought we were just having fun. Vikrin's jaw tightened. Draveri do not waste time with fun. Ryan chuckled. Really? Because Kira seemed to enjoy herself just fine. Kyra shot him a glare, But Vecren's expression darkened. He stepped closer to Ryan, towering over him. Listen carefully, human. Whatever game you are playing, it ends now. Kyra belongs with her own kind. Ryan didn't flinch. Instead, he smirked. I don't think Kyra belongs to anyone. She makes her own choices. Vecren growled low in his throat. And you think she would choose you? The challenge in his voice was clear. Kyra stood abruptly. Enough. I don't need either of you deciding anything for me. Vecren's gaze flickered between them before he let out a low chuckle. Fine, but be careful, Kyra. If you continue down this path, you may not be welcomed back. With that, he turned and strode out of the cafe. Ryan let out a breath. Well, he seems friendly. Kyra frowned. Vecren's warning lingered in her mind. What if he was right? She glanced at Ryan. Was this challenge really just an experiment anymore? Kyra walked through the dim corridors of Zephyrian Prime, her mind a mess of conflicting thoughts. Vecren's warning echoed in her head. If you continue down this path, you may not be welcomed back. Her people valued strength, discipline, and tradition. She had never questioned it before. Until now. Ryan had challenged everything she believed. Humans bond by choice. They didn't need a cycle, a command, or instincts. They simply chose who they wanted. It made no sense, but somehow it felt real. She clenched her fists. No, this was just an experiment. Nothing more. Then why did she hesitate? Lost in thought, she didn't notice Ryan walking beside her until he spoke. You okay? Kyra blinked and glanced at him. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? Ryan smirked. Well, let's see. You just got threatened by a guy twice my size. Your whole species is probably gossiping about you, and you look like you want to punch a hole in the wall. Kyra sighed. I do not care about gossip. Ryan chuckled. Yeah, sure. They walked in silence for a moment. The hum of the station's energy lines buzzed softly in the background. Then Ryan said something unexpected. You don't have to prove anything, you know. Kyra frowned. What do you mean? Ryan shrugged. This whole challenge. You don't need to prove humans can bond anytime. You've already seen it. It's not a trick. Kyra stopped walking. Then why did I fail? Ryan turned to her, confused. Fail. She clenched her jaw. Treveri, do not hesitate. And yet, I hesitate. Ryan studied her for a moment, then smiled. That's because you're starting to understand. Kyra scowled. Understand what? That bonding isn't about rules. It's about choice. Ryan stepped closer, his voice softer now. And maybe you're realizing that you have a choice too. Kyra's heart pounded. A choice. Her people didn't choose. They followed tradition, instinct, duty. But for the first time, Kyra wondered, what if I don't want to follow tradition? Ryan's brown eyes held no judgment, no expectation, just quiet understanding. Kyra exhaled. This challenge isn't over. Ryan grinned. Didn't think so. As they stood in the dim corridor, Kyra knew one thing for certain. Vecren was right. If she kept walking this path, she might not be welcomed back. But for the first time, that didn't scare her. The days after the tense encounter with Vecren were quiet. Kyra kept her distance from the humans, but her mind was far from peaceful. She couldn't stop thinking about the things Ryan had said, the things she had felt. In her culture, strength came from discipline. Everything had a place. Nothing was ever uncertain. But now, with each passing day, her thoughts became more and more uncertain. She had never imagined that a human could challenge everything she believed. It was a warm afternoon when Kyra found herself in the station's central garden, standing alone. She stared out at the small patch of greenery that the humans had planted in the middle of the station, a strange but calming oasis in the midst of metal and machinery. Ryan appeared from behind a tree. I've been looking for you. Kyra turned, her expression unreadable. Why? He shrugged. You've been avoiding me. I thought I'd give you some space, but I'm not going to back down from our challenge." She looked at him for a long moment, considering his words. Back down. What did that mean? Ryan's eyes softened. You know, I think you're starting to understand humans better than you realize. Kyra clenched her fists. Don't tell me I'm starting to understand. This whole thing was your idea. You think you can just make me change my mind with your ridiculous human ways. Ryan stepped closer, his voice calm. I'm not asking you to change your mind, Kyra. I'm asking you to think for yourself, and I think you already are. Her heart raced. The words were simple, but they carried weight. They made her question everything she had believed. She had been told her whole life that a Dravari warrior didn't question, didn't doubt, didn't need the human ideas of free will or connection. Yet here she was, on a strange space station, questioning everything. I don't need your help, human. She tried to sound firm, but there was something in her voice she couldn't hide. Ryan smiled softly. That's the problem, Kyra. You don't need me. You need yourself. And maybe you've been afraid of what happens when you stop following the rules. Kyra was silent for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Maybe I've been afraid of what I would become. Ryan looked at her, waiting. Kyra's tail swayed nervously. I'm not ready to go back to my people, Ryan. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I'm not ready to follow their rules anymore. Ryan's eyes softened, and he stepped forward, his hand reaching out but stopping just short of touching her. You don't have to go back. Not if you don't want to. Kyra's breath caught. For the first time, she realized that the choice was hers. She didn't have to go back. Kyra took a deep breath and made her decision. Her voice was firm, but there was a strange warmth to it. I'm staying. But I'm doing this on my terms, not anyone else's. Ryan's face lit up with a grin. I knew you'd come around. The air between them shifted, no longer tense, but full of possibilities. Kyra felt something new inside her, a kind of freedom she had never known. I guess this experiment isn't over yet, she said, her voice playful. Ryan chuckled. No, but maybe it's just getting started. And as the two stood there, the weight of Kyra's decision settling in, she knew that this was only the beginning. Kyra stood with Ryan in the station's central garden, the sun filtering through the artificial trees overhead. The soft hum of the station's engines was the only sound, but it felt like the universe had paused, waiting for her next move. Her mind raced with thoughts she hadn't allowed herself to consider before. Choice, freedom, and connection. She had spent so much of her life adhering to the rigid rules of her people, but now, after everything she had experienced, it felt like those rules had become nothing but chains. Ryan stood next to her, his presence calm and steady. He didn't push her, didn't rush her decision. He just waited. I've made my decision, Kyra said, her voice firm. Ryan turned to her, his brown eyes curious. And what is that? I'm staying, not because you convinced me, but because I want to choose for myself. Ryan smiled, a soft, understanding grin. I think that's the best decision you could make. Kyra took a deep breath, her gaze moving across the garden. The world around her felt different now, like she was seeing everything for the first time. Do you know what's strange? She said, her voice thoughtful. Before I met you, I never questioned anything. My people have always told us what to do, how to act, who to bond with. But now it feels like I've been missing something important. Ryan nodded. You've been missing choice, and the ability to choose who you want to be with. That's what makes humans different. Kyra hesitated for a moment, the weight of his words settling in. I used to think that was weakness, that having no instinct, no cycle to guide us, was a flaw. She looked at him, but now I see it differently. Maybe it's a strength. Ryan chuckled softly. Well, I'm glad you're seeing it my way. Kyra smirked, her tail flicking playfully. Don't get too comfortable, human. I'm still not convinced I'll ever fully understand your species. Ryan laughed. That's fair. I think we have a lot to teach each other." As they walked through the garden, side by side, Kyra's thoughts drifted. She didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she could choose her own path. She didn't have to go back to Draveri's society. She didn't have to follow anyone else's rules. She had made her own decision. And as for Ryan, well, there was still so much to learn from him. From humans, from everything she had once dismissed as weak. Kyra stopped and turned to Ryan, her expression serious. "You were right about one thing." "What's that?" he asked. She met his gaze, her voice steady but full of meaning. "It's not about proving humans can bond year-round. It's about proving that we all have the right to choose. And I'm choosing this." Ryan's smile grew, his eyes reflecting pride. "And I'm glad you did." The station around them, once a cold place of metal and technology, now felt like home. Kyra didn't know where this new path would lead, but for the first time, she didn't feel alone. She didn't feel confined. And maybe, just maybe, that was the greatest bond of all. Kyra stood at the edge of the station's observation deck, staring out into the vastness of space. The stars twinkled in the distance, each one a reminder of the endless possibilities waiting to be discovered. But here, on this station, she had already discovered something new, herself. Ryan joined her, standing a few steps away, his presence comforting but respectful of the space she needed. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was peaceful, like two people who had begun to understand each other in ways neither had expected. Kyra took a deep breath, her mind racing. Everything had changed. The challenge she had accepted months ago, to prove humans could bond without instinct, felt like it belonged to another lifetime. It wasn't just about the experiment anymore. It was about something deeper, about her, about choice. "I've been thinking," Kyra said, her voice soft but firm. Ryan turned to her, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "About what?" "About my people," she replied, her gaze never leaving the stars. "I've always believed in the way we were raised. Strength, discipline, rules. There's no room for weakness in Draveri culture. But now," she paused, trying to find the right words. "Now I see things differently." Ryan stepped closer, his tone gentle. "You're not the same person who first came here. You've grown, Kyra." She shook her head, a small, uncertain smile on her lips. "I don't know if I've grown. I've just changed." Her gaze shifted to him, locking eyes. "I've been taught that to be strong, I have to follow orders, that I can't question what I've been taught. But now, I realize that strength doesn't come from following rules. It comes from having the freedom to choose. The freedom to decide who I want to be." Ryan smiled softly, his voice filled with understanding. "You've figured it out." Kyra nodded. "But what I don't know is, where does this leave me? My people will never understand this. They'll never accept it." Ryan looked out into the distance with her, considering her words. "It's a hard choice. I won't lie about that. But sometimes you have to choose for yourself, even if others don't understand, even if it's not easy." Kyra's chest tightened. It was so simple, yet so complicated. Could she really walk away from everything she had known? Could she leave her people behind, knowing they might never accept her decision? "What if I choose this life, Ryan?" she asked quietly. "What if I choose to stay here with you with humans?" Ryan turned to face her fully, his eyes serious now. "Then you choose the life you want. No one else can make that choice for you." Her heart pounded in her chest. The weight of her decision was enormous, but for the first time, she felt a sense of peace in the uncertainty. She was making this choice, not out of obligation, but out of a desire for something more. Kyra stepped away from the observation deck, her eyes bright with newfound determination. "Then I choose this. I choose my own path." Ryan's smile was full of warmth. "I'm glad you made that choice, Kyra." And as she walked beside him, her future stretched out before her. Uncertain, yes, but full of endless possibilities. The path she had chosen wasn't easy, and it would never be simple. but it was hers to walk. Kara stood in the middle of the bustling space station, the familiar hum of machinery and the chatter of different species all around her. But today, the sounds felt different. Today, everything felt different. She had made her choice. She had chosen her own path, a path that didn't follow the rules of her people, but was guided by something deeper, something more personal. The challenge she had once thought was about proving humans were capable of bonding any time had grown into something far more meaningful. It had become a challenge about freedom, about choice. Ryan was by her side, as he always was now. They had become more than just participants in an experiment. They had become something else, something neither of them had expected. "You okay?" Ryan asked, looking at her with that calm, understanding gaze. Kyra smiled. "I am now." She had spent so many years obeying the rules of her people, rules that had kept her safe, kept her strong, but also kept her locked in a cage of expectations. The Dravari had always valued strength, discipline, and unwavering duty. But now, after everything she had learned from Ryan and the humans, she realized that strength wasn't just about following orders. It was about being true to yourself. She glanced at Ryan, who smiled back. He had stood by her throughout the entire journey. He had never pushed her, never tried to force her into making a decision. He had simply allowed her to think for herself. It was that freedom, that respect for her choices, that had helped her see the truth. "I know it's not going to be easy," Kyra said, her voice soft but steady. "There's a part of me that still wonders if I made the right choice." Ryan looked at her, his expression serious. "There will always be doubts, but the important thing is that you made the choice, your choice." Kyra nodded. I think I'm starting to understand that. I've spent so long trying to live up to someone else's expectations, but now I can live for myself. And that's worth more than any rule or tradition." Ryan smiled. "Exactly. And I'm proud of you for it." She chuckled softly. "I didn't think I'd hear you say that." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "You didn't think I'd be proud of you for choosing freedom." Kyra shrugged playfully. "Maybe I thought you'd be worried. I mean, I'm Dravari. I'm not exactly your typical choice for a friend." Ryan laughed. "Who's ever typical? Besides, I never really cared about where you came from. I care about who you are now." Kyra felt her chest warm at his words. For the first time, she felt like she truly belonged. Not because she fit some mold or followed a set of rules, but because she had finally chosen to be where she was. As they walked together through the station, side by side, Kyra felt a sense of peace settle over her. The future was still uncertain. She didn't know exactly what would happen next or how her people would react to her decision. But for the first time, that didn't matter. She had made her choice, and that was enough.